happy weekend of retaliation and welcome back to a special episode of the DD Geopolitics live stream. I am here with two of my absolute favorite good friends, Hala Jaber and Elijah Magnier. Hi, how are you both doing on this blessed weekend?
Hi, Sarah, and good evening, and hi, Elijah, and lovely to be with you as well. Yeah, we're good. We're good. It was a long night for everybody, but here we are. We all came one
Did you
day
guys sleep at
better
all?
for it, so to speak.
Hello,
Did you
both.
Sorry.
have you
Hello.
slept? I know people haven't slept in 48 hours. Have you guys slept at all?
I know. Yeah, I think I slept at about 7 in the morning for a few hours. Yeah.
I was telling Elijah before we joined the show that I said I better get Elijah and Hala in before the retaliation starts so I could get their predictions. And then I said, "Oh crap!" And you're just like all started happening. So they're in Beirut. Elijah's at
I know.
in Europe. What it started happening and I remember the skies kind of cleared, the airspace cleared, and I think it was my co-founder that was like, nothing's happening. Everybody said nothing. I said, this is something's happening. And so what was it like in Lebanon?
I think, no, I mean, yesterday, it's a good thing I didn't go out yesterday. I was planning to, and I decided to stay in, but I was sort of just browsing on my iPad and thinking, okay, I'm gonna sit back tonight, take a break from Spaces and Twitter and all that, and I really, really, really need to watch a film, you know. And I thought I'd check the last time, and then it started, so I was looking. And I could see this one video, the first video that came out, and I just didn't buy it. I thought that doesn't look right? So, and it took me, I wouldn't tweet, it took me about half an hour until I figured that I needed confirmation because it sounded it just happened, we weren't kind of expecting it, especially after the ship yesterday. I thought, nah, not today, they'll drag it a bit.
What about you, Elijah? Was it
No, he was asleep. I was calling him.
I was calling you like, get up, it's World War III, it's happening.
I was like, oh my God, I rang and rang nothing, and I rang and rang nothing. I thought, okay, I looked at the time and I'm like, yeah, it's his time, but it's his bedtime. But Eli, you need to wake up today because this is not the tonight of all nights. You need to be up.
Well, what happened is I switch off my phone when I switch off the day.
Exactly.
And but I have few friends who knows how to contact me, and then they in the day they said, well, prepare yourself for a long night. I said, well, yeah, okay. Well, we see if it's going to happen because the decision of the hit is taken on a very top level, and it's not obvious that many people would know about when it's going to start. But because there were missiles that were prepared and they need several hours before, then they said, come on, prepare yourself for tonight. So when the bombardment was launched, particularly the drones, and they said, okay, now it's happening, you need to come. And then I said, okay, I switched on my phone again, and then I had around 32 messages telling me about what was happening. Then I said, then I was engaged until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I slept for 2 hours, and then I'm still up since.
That's good. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the kind of lead up to this. I talked to you guys throughout the conflict, but this I haven't really talked to you since Israel really kind of went rogue. And I was talking to a few people, Professor Danny Shaw, earlier this week about this about how with the subversion of international law and how everything's kind of the rule book gets thrown out the window. So I talked to the Russian ambassador about the ceasefires that don't work apparently, and then we have Israel attack the embassy in Syria. Now, this is sovereign Iranian territory. Can we talk a little bit about the subversion of international law and what this kind of means? Because immediately following this assault on an embassy, Ecuador invaded their Mexican embassy. So does this set another precedent, and does this flout international law even further? And are we seeing a real breakdown of kind of the rules-based order, the law-based order? You're gonna hand it to Hala?
I think, yeah, I think there is. I think, look, when Israel flouts international, they always find an excuse for it, right? And now they're being picky. They're saying, you know, well, this was actually not the mission itself. It was not the embassy itself. It was not the consulate itself. I know that embassy because I used to spend a lot of time in Syria. I used to drive by it, and I've been into the embassy. It is part of the embassy, whichever way Israel wants to. Embassy, it's part of this diplomatic mission. So, and yes, like you say, Sarah, you see, they set a precedent, but the problem is that if another country does it, they will actually scream and shout and say, well, you're breaking international law. But where Israel is concerned, Israel is never in violation of international law. And that's what we've been seeing. I mean, look at yesterday and everything that happened. Everyone seemed, in countries that were involved, everyone seemed to forget it was Israel who aggressed in the first place. They broke international law. They violated international law. And yet everyone was blaming Iran, who was actually taking defensive action. So this is how it usually goes. Really?
Well, there were violations in the past, of course, but I don't think it is fair to draw it in and say, well, there were in the past, like for example, the Chinese embassy during the American bombing of Serbia, or other diplomatic incident, or violation of the 1961 Vienna Convention. However, this is not the point. The point is this is a recognized diplomatic territory that is considered Iranian territory. It is protected by international law. Now, as you rightly said, Sarah, the violation of international law cannot be tolerated and should not be tolerated. And the way the West is twisting it today, they are completely forgetting about the right of Iran to defend itself according to the UN Charter, Article 51. But they are saying the Iranian strike on Israel cannot be tolerated. So everything before that has been completely wiped out, like it doesn't exist. What exists today is how to deal with the Iranian atrocity or threat or danger that Iran is representing with its missile arsenal against the people of Israel. This is how now the narrative that is presented, and this is the way the mainstream media is driving it. But of course, that is eating up on the little remaining of the Western value, the international laws, the United Nations Security Council, and all the international law that exists, to the point that there is a need of a change today. There are two wars going on, one between the US, it's as a proxy war against Russia, and another one of the Israeli with their allies against the people of Palestine. We cannot allow any rhetoric that is valid for one and is not valid for another. Everything should be treated equally, and I don't think this time Israel is going to get away with it.
Really? So neither of you think, do you also think that Israel is not going to get away with it this time, Hala?
Yeah, I mean, yesterday was an example of the fact that Israel is not going to get away with it. It has in the past. That's what I was trying to say. But and it misunderstood sometimes when it was allowed, and it's misread for weakness. And this time, Iran is saying, actually, it doesn't happen anymore, and you will not misread the fact that we may be patient sometimes or tolerant because we do not want to drag everybody into a war. This is not going to happen anymore. And because we've seen, all of us, including Iran and everybody else that has, one brain cell, we've seen how many international laws, war crimes, violations of international law they've committed live on our screens. And no one has actually said to Israel, at least we've screamed about it, but no one of the big powers that are supporting Israel have told Israel, have reined Israel and said enough is enough. So Israel has been allowed to be this, or Netanyahu for that matter, is like it's like a wild little spoiled brat that's been allowed to run amok and do whatever. When it becomes difficult for him, they still come, and covet him and support him and embrace him and help him. So I think Iran yesterday made a point of saying, no, this will not be allowed in the future. And from now on, anything you try and do, we can. You've misunderstood our patience in the past to translate it into a weakness, but it's not a weakness, actually. But from now on, the rules of the games are different. And we're
Well, we lost Hala. I'm sure she'll be back. They got her. Oh, here she is. Hold on. Let's see. Hold on. But what I did want to touch on next is kind of the way the scenario planned out, and hopefully we get Hala back. It's kind of like the dominoes of how each country sort of either closed or opened its airspace and then sort of like picked a side in a sort of way. And it was really interesting to watch because it really separated the people that are kind of the soft resistance or soft Zionists and who is actually here for the axis of resistance, which I thought was really interesting because we have Jordan actively shooting down projectiles. What are your thoughts on that? Because at first they closed their airspace down. Then they said, oh, we're not going to let the jets use it. Then they said, we are going to let the jets use it. And then the attack happens and they activate their air defense systems and shoot down drones, which then actually hurt and possibly killed some Jordanians. So what does this say about Jordan, and where does this leave their relationship with the Arab world after this?
Well, the Arab world is not united behind Palestine, unfortunately. This is why the Jordanian, the Egyptians, and the rest of the Arab countries are not doing enough to support the Palestinian cause. And so far, they have not succeeded to force Israel to allow the trucks on the land road to access Gaza and to access north of Gaza, which is the most important part where the people are starving. Secondly, all the Arab regimes are afraid of the Americans and the Americans' influence over their country because their regime stands depending on the support of the Americans. If they say no, then the Americans will wave the card of democracy, of human rights, the usual narrative to bring down a king or an emir and to force him to change his policy and accept to fit in with what the Americans and their allies, and in this case, Israel. Now, Jordan has maintained an excellent relationship with Israel since the father, King Abdullah, and even before the Arab war on the Zionists, and we're talking about before 1973. And because of that, the relationship is not new. Jordan is offering also the land road to supply food and all the fruit that the Israelis want to avoid the Red Sea that was blocked by the Ansarullah in Yemen, the real supporter of Palestine, and that is through the Emirates and Saudi Arabia. So because of that, Jordan did not only allow the Patriot missiles that are deployed on the borders by the Israelis, on the common borders between Iraq and Jordan, into the Jordanian territory, but they also allowed the Israeli jet to fly over the Jordanian space and to hunt down many dozens of drones and ballistic missiles that were fired by Iran and failed to reach their objective because of the open space that Jordan allowed the Americans and the Israeli jets to use. So also there is another point that is important to mention. Today, there is a clear understanding why the Americans are in Al-Tanf and in the northeast Syria, because their bases deployed anti-air missiles and interception missiles, and they were used in the occupied Syrian area to intercept drones and missiles. So we had the Americans, the British, the French in the sky, and the Israelis all united, plus all the interception missiles on the ground, plus the several layers of the Israelis, i.e. the Iron Dome, the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3, the David Sling, and the Patriot that the Israelis have to intercept the and reduce the impact of the Iranian hit.
Well, and then we have this crazy juxtaposition. I'm really glad you brought up the kind of the way that they're allowing the food to get into Israel through Jordan, and then the king is doing his like airdrops, and like Jason Bourne, he's like living his dreams of being like a some sort of a Tom Clancy.
007.
Yeah, he's like a Tom Clancy character or something. And then they do these airdrops, which then the Gazans call humiliation drops. And then they shoot down drones, and then they say, you know, we're not going to allow our airspace to be used by Iran. And it's like, are they like a hostile actor? What happens inside of Jordan? We know that they're mostly Palestinians. I don't want to get too far off the beaten path into Jordan, but they have a huge population of ethnic Palestinians. What kind of internal turmoil do you think this could create inside the state of Jordan?
I think, look, we need to differentiate, I think, between the Jordanian, the people themselves,
yes,
and the king and the government. And I think as people, the people are in Gaza. A lot of them would have families there. They've been trying to go on the streets. They've been trying to even sometimes, you know, close or go and demonstrate where these crossings are, where foods trucks are allowed into Israel. But listen, Sarah, bottom line is Jordan is a police state, always has been, always will be, a very heavily police state. It may not look so to the outside eye, but it is. You know, you could be sitting anywhere around you. It's very much in control. They control everything. And they allow every now and then people to go on demonstrations just to let them sort of vent, okay? But they're not allowed to do beyond that. Yesterday, what Elijah was saying, I mean, I'm sorry, I missed a bit because I lost my connection, but not only were they allowing the Israeli flights to come in, you know, to hunt those missiles, but the Judeo was involved in bringing down some of these missiles. I think people today, after that, will find it very, very, embarrassing, but also they would be very angry because it does not represent them. And I mean, today all I was reading was about, you know, general comments from everyone in the Arab world that's involved, you know, look at the other countries, but you know, the Levant, at least the axis. But I think the Jordanians, we're gonna see them on the streets with a lot of anger as a result of this. I don't think they will be pleased. Because this was uncalled for. It was also, you know, and the king is married to a Palestinian woman, and he's used very harsh words against Israel, and even the Israeli, you know, he came to support us despite his previous harsh words against Israel. So he kind of made it up by supporting them at the time when he shouldn't have. He should have just stood back and let this happen, play out without getting involved. And that I think it was. I mean, it is shameful. It's actually I think it's offensive to defending or dropping an aid package too, and then to go and do something like this yesterday.
Do you have anything to add to that, Elijah?
No, Hala.
Well, then we also have Egypt, who's kind of going through the same thing, but maybe in a lesser sense, but they're kind of being pushed up against this wall into these loans and selling off their real estate to the UAE, and then that puts them in a strange position. They also kind of freaked out yesterday, but we're more along the lines of like, we're going to protect ourselves and we're not really going to get involved. What happens with Egypt next? I know that Egyptians are very disappointed in the way that their government is handling the situation, but we also know that the government is in dire straits economically. So what happens to Egypt? They just joined BRICS. They have this war going on, but they're still taking loans from the West, and they're kind of trying to navigate this system as kind of a weaker state. There's one of the stronger states in the region, but they're not negotiating from a place of power.
I mean, what I'd like to see eventually happen in Egypt, because again, we talk to a lot of people in Egypt, and and as people, they are really in the same trench. They are all for Palestinians, all for Gazas, all for wanting to help. Or if they're allowed, they'll actually go in themselves in their millions and provide support for the Palestinians. But again, we're talking about governments that, for one reason or another, political, economical, financial, I don't know, that are beholden to the West. They have been subjugated to the point where they will not take decisions. At least Egypt at the moment has stood firm about not accepting a mass evacuation of Palestinians, and at least it's taken that stance and said no matter how much pressure that they've put on it, in order to expel Palestinians. I mean, they claim they want Palestinians to leave temporarily for protection, for safety, but the Egyptians have said no, because we know better from the Nakba that this could lead into another one. That's the only thing they've done. But they talk about border crossings. The Egyptians usually defend by saying, well, it's under Israeli control. So what? I mean, this is where Egypt should take a bit more a firmer stance, but it's not. I think in the past, when Mubarak, how long did it take? And we saw when Egypt rises up, and they do rise up in numbers and in strength, and they toppled a government that was entrenched there for years and years, and no one ever thought that Mubarak would go, and they made sure that he did. So have they reached that point? Not yet, because a lot of people are benefiting, a lot of people are pro-Sisi, and they're very a lot of economical things that are happening in the country. So I don't think it's the majority at the moment that are there to actually take to the streets like they did during the so-called spring revolutions and topple a regime, basically. I don't know. I think, Elijah, you may have some more to say on this.
Well, I agree with what you said. What I can say is the Egyptian people never agreed to absorb and become friend of the Israelis. Never. They always kept a distance. They would not want to become one nation, or to have Israeli friends, or to accept them in the country, or to give them services. Generally speaking, I'm talking about the majority of the Egyptians never swallowed the fact that Egypt had a peace deal with Israel. However, unfortunately, in the Arab world, the people don't decide. There are the rulers, and depending on either too much poverty or too much money, where people either they are so living in such a huge ease in life, where they don't care about politics and they want to continue benefiting, and they don't have the feeling of what for example, in this case, the Palestinians have been and are still suffering all these years. However, the people who are poor, like the Egyptians, because we're talking about the biggest country in the Middle East and West Asia, and we're talking about the gate between the Middle East and Africa, with Sudan, of course, but people are suffering, and this is why every time President Sisi, who did not come out of an election, and the election of Sisi was similar to the percentage of the drone and missiles intercepted by the Israeli, that is 99.99% of the vote. And we see there the similarity of dictatorship in comparison to the fake narrative of the Israeli telling us how they managed to intercept the missile. So when you are dealing with people like that, where they are in a dire economic situation, then it is inevitable that people will look on how they look after their families and with their well-being. And because of the regime, as Hala rightly said, they don't have a lot of space to breathe and express their opinion, because it's a very strict regime under control of the not only the police but the intelligence services. Nevertheless, people in the Middle East stand with the Palestinian cause, generally speaking. But standing with the Palestinian cause is no longer enough. Something should be done to the Palestinians.
Yeah.
It is not by, it is a lot to go on social media and support them. But is this giving the effect that the Palestinians are in need of for their protection, for their state, for their well-being, for their support, for them to continue their armed struggle as they want? Of course not. Unfortunately, more than 1.8 billion Arabs and Muslim and Christian in the Middle East are not able to support just a handful of few million Palestinians who have been suffering since 1948.
Let's switch over to kind of the military side. So another actually good news, breaking news for you guys and our listeners. The Rafah invasion has now been delayed indefinitely. So that's an enormous victory for Iran. I hope that this shuts up all of the naysayers that said, this isn't going to do anything. This isn't enough. These are just fireworks. Well, now we have a postponed Rafah invasion that was probably going to lead to 500,000 casualties. So that is an enormous win for Iran and the axis of resistance. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, it literally just came in about 5 or 10 minutes ago.
They've officially said that they will not be doing it.
Israeli media came out and said it's delayed.
Okay. I mean, I think he was using Rafah for many things, but I think again, we know that the United States was not keen on this happening because they were worried. They didn't want to go into Rafah or eliminate Hamas or whatever the terminologies they use is, but because they were worried about a massive massacre that could, like you just said, could bring, 500,000 people dead, and no one can handle that. And I think now, yesterday proved something. Like I said earlier, it's about and also bringing about a new equation into the game. The Palestinians have been left on their own. Literally, they've been abandoned. Aside from an axis that has tried very hard to alleviate some of the pressure and some of the things that Israel is doing, the rest of the Arab world has left them literally to die. And while they haven't lifted the finger. So I think Iran's involvement yesterday, for whatever the reasons were as well, because they were also doing it for another point and this, and I think there was discussion previous to this, or reports said that Iran had suggested, that they should sort of alleviate, they should provide the issue of the Palestinian, etc., and then Iran might, go easy on the Israeli attack or so on and so forth. But I think yesterday showing that it is willing to go in and fight. It is willing to cross all these thousands of kilometers to get into Israel. I think that would concern the Israelis, and I think now there is more pressure from the Americans and the Europeans. He should step aside a little bit and try and reconsider things, because they need to bring this to a close, Sarah. I mean, no one can tolerate watching these people die on a single daily basis, as we've been doing, or for that matter, see them starve, en masse. And I think this is one thing, again, it might not be for all the right reasons, but even they're beginning to feel that legally they are now involved in this. It is going to reflect on them. They're becoming, partners in crime, if you want. So if not for the Palestinian sake, they're doing it for their sake. So I say bring it on, as long as it helps the Palestinians.
Elijah?
On Rafah, I think Netanyahu doesn't have a plan. He said he had signed off the plan 3 times. And then the last time he said the plan is ready to be implemented. And then one day later, his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, said, we don't have a plan. And the Americans said there is no plan for Rafah yet, notwithstanding what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is saying. And the reason why there is no plan is very obvious. he is not acting in a strategic way, but he's acting in a way to allow this war to last as long as possible. So, strategically speaking and military speaking, if he has pulled out his forces of the south, then logically he needs to allow people to relocate to their homes in the south. And we're talking about Khan Yunis, Hamad, Nusayrat, all this area. And what he's doing is he's not giving them a break, and he is returning with his soldiers to occupy and attack areas like in Khan Yunis or Nusayrat, conducting what he calls security and intelligence attack on Hamas and the Palestinian resistance for a few days or a week or 2 weeks, as he has done in the Shifa complex in the north. So he is not giving enough assurances for the 1.5 million Palestinians living in Rafah as internally displaced refugees to return to their home and start leaving Rafah, and to allow his military to break into the city and the last biggest concentration of internally displaced Palestinian refugees. And if he's continuing to say, I want to go to Rafah, and he doesn't have the tent, he doesn't allow the Palestinians to return safely to the north or to the south, and he doesn't relocate them voluntarily or by force, and they're still there, it is out of the question for his military to break into Rafah. Therefore, when we start seeing a displacement of the displaced Palestinian refugees in Rafah, then this is where the military operation becomes more logical and feasible. And this is why the Americans are saying there is no logical or there is no practical plan that Netanyahu is forwarding for the attack on Rafah, and that explains why his defense minister is saying, no, we don't have a plan. So, but Netanyahu is using it as an excuse to say, I need to take Rafah to end Hamas, to offer to the Israeli society what he claims as a total victory, which is a false claim. He needs to go to Rafah. And because he's not going to Rafah, he's asking the Americans, please hold me back. I'm going to go to Rafah, but hold me back. And the Americans are saying, well, you can't go. And Netanyahu is saying to the extremists in his government, well, the more extremist than him, because he is an extremist, you see, the Americans are preventing me to go to Rafah to offer you a victory. Allow me to stay. Stop bothering me, because I want to finish the 5 remaining battalions of Hamas in Rafah. So all that is a theater for the time being.
Well, we're going to switch over to the actual strikes, but first we did the favor of putting together, I guess, a highlight reel of the strikes and some of their impacts. So, Aria, if you have that video, could you cue it up for our listeners?
اطلع شوف الصواريخ الهبنه والحسين
خرابات ساعت 2 نصف شب بامداد 26 فروردین 1403
بايتني
راحت جاهز قصف رام الله. كثف عن ايد على رام الله كثف. ولع ولعت تنفيري. الله اكبر انا زينت يا محمد. تعزير فجر المطار.
Never did I get a little bit teary-eyed over a highlight reel of airstrikes, but beautiful celebrations in Iran, Yemen, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon. Lebanon had a huge motorcycle parade, I think, and just a lot of rejoicing. I think it's okay to be happy. I feel like Iran was incredibly precise, and as far as I can tell, there was only one casualty, or I heard that he didn't die; he was just hurt. So that really speaks a lot of volumes as to what Iran was doing, and its precision striking. Elijah, what can you tell us about what they used, the capabilities of those missiles, what they hit, and what that kind of means? Today, in the aftermath, we're kind of hearing as the dust settles, Iran deployed most of its older stocks, some of the stuff that it wanted to kind of get rid of. Is that sort of the case? And we have a while to go before we even start to see an inch of what Iran's new capabilities are?
Well, Iran used several kind of drones and ballistic missiles of different type because the Iranians aim is to avoid the Israeli GPS jamming. This is why they use another system which is based on gyroscope. They've used cruise missiles. It's kind of what in the West is known as a tomahawk, but this is an Iranian production, and they use four kind of drones that fly on different altitude. They are the lowest altitude to avoid the Iron Dome and the highest altitude. And the reason why Iran used different weapons is also a kind of a test how they can hit Israel, particularly of the distance between 1,100 to 1,200 kilometers. So many countries can see the arrival of all these missiles, and many jets of different countries that were waiting for these missiles and these drones to see how they are traveling and how they can hunt them down. But normally, in the modern warfare, the drones are used to open the road for the missiles to arrive, because the missile that Iran used traveled between 6 to 11 minutes between Iran and Israel, and because of that, the drone traveled 6 to 7 times less fast than the ballistic missiles. This is why they send the drone first, and the interception missiles of the Israelis and the Americans, the Jordanians, the British, and the French will start hunting down the drones, and they allow some hole for the ballistic missile to go through. And the difference that the Iranian has used is they've used old missiles that are a little bit modernized. They only used 7 hypersonic missiles that have reached their target, and they've used several also new generation of drones, a few kind because they wanted to test if these can evade the interception, Israeli and other countries' interception missile, and they did manage to reach their target. The other point that is important to highlight here is all the those who are sitting behind the monitor, not in a jet, but behind the monitor on the ground to see where these missiles are reaching. This is where they understand the target that was selected by Iran. And by selecting 500 plus targets, the Israelis understand the huge bank of objectives that the Iranians have and what they can do as they send the new model of their missiles. And if the Iranians wanted really to hurt Israel badly, they would have launched missiles from Iraq or from Lebanon or from the borders between Syria and Lebanon. But the objective was not to cause damage. The objective is to hit the pride of Israel. The objective is to deter the Israelis from attacking Iran again because they have attacked an Iranian territory by attacking the consulate in Damascus. That was the objective. And the objective is also to show to the Arab country that Israel can be hit. It is not a taboo. Another objective was to respond to Joe Biden, who said to the Iranians just a few hours before, don't. So don't dare to do it. And the Iranians said, we dare, show us how you can respond now. So this is the multi-layer messages that Iran sent to Israel, to the West, to the United States, to NATO, to the Arab country, but also to the Arab population and to their own people, that we can defend you wherever you are, and it is not, your life is important for us. And even if it is Israel, that the strongest army in the Middle East, that is no longer the case after the 7th of October and their very poor performance in failing to achieve the desired objectives after more than 6 months, and we are in the 7th month of war, of devastating war, of the on a very small area against the group of Palestinian resistance. This is another message that Iran wanted to send, and to say this army can be defeated, and it is a weak army that is capable only to destroy, but not to gain ground, not to fight. It is not a courageous army. It is actually an army made of coward and TikToker.
Can I add something there?
Of course, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think, I mean, what Elijah just said is absolutely on point. I've been thinking about it also since I said, I mean, we know this was never going to be, this was not intended as a tit for tat. The Iranians do not work that way. So it wasn't a case of, you know, you killed one of mine and I'm going to kill one of yours, or so on and so forth. It was not meant to go and destroy or cause casualties. It was a message, and it was a point of making, creating a new deterrence and creating a new formula, if you want, in the region. But what's also interesting is people said, you know, this is all theatrics, and you know, so what did they achieve? And the Israelis said, you know, well, we downed 99% of the drones and the missiles, etc., etc. But what actually Iran achieved in all of this, which again was not meant to destroy or kill or cause damage or cause casualties, it actually intercepted, it actually found, discovered this session yesterday where the interceptions were coming from, okay, from the West, from the Americans, from the Jordanians, where the weaknesses were. It can do reverse engineering and learn from it for the next round. I mean, for Iran, it was a huge testing ground from which it benefits for any second retaliate. And for Israel and the West, they've literally shown their cards. You know, they showed where they are positioned, where they are placed, and where they intercepted the Iranian missiles. And I think Iran learned those points as well, and that's to Iran's benefit rather than to Israel's benefit.
Well, and sure. And so let's talk about what they actually did hit, since we know that it wasn't supposed to be this like extreme rain of hellfire and devastation. So what actually did they hit? I'm hearing that they hit 2 air bases. Scott Ritter said that one of them was the F-35 base, then maybe that's kind of out of commission for a bit, and the other one was down towards the south. Is that accurate, Elijah, on what assets took casualties?
Well, what they aim is for military barracks, military position, and air bases. And they've concentrated on the Negev, where the Israelis have the F-35 that took off to hit the Iranian consulate. Now, the Israelis, interestingly, showed today one runway where F-35 is landing. Now, we don't have the date, but even if that's right, what the Israelis don't know, that we know there are 3 runways, not 1. So we've seen only 1. But it doesn't matter. Even if they manage to damage the runway and it is repairable, but how they can damage the deterrence, how they can damage the pride of, how they can repair the Israelis, how they can repair their pride, how they can repair their reputation, how they can tell the people, and I'm talking here about the government of Israel, how Netanyahu and his gang can tell the people in Israel that they can defend them. They failed to defend them on the 7th of October. They have failed to defend them in the settlements around the Gaza envelope. They have failed to defend them on the borders with Lebanon. They have more than 200 to 250,000 internally displaced. They have failed to defend them from the Iranian drones and missiles. And they can't defend them from the Houthis' missiles and blockage of the Red Sea. They can't defend them from the blockage of the Strait of Hormuz if Iran decides to close it down. They can't defend them in the Mediterranean if Hezbollah decides to close it in case of a wider war. So what they can do, they can't defend them from Iraq. And the Americans are present in Iraq and they are afraid of being kicked out if they engage in a battle against Iran. So what is the reason behind any presence of an Israeli who has a home and a family abroad and left everything to come for a lacking of security that the army and the government promised to offer? This is why there are more than 750 to 800,000 Israelis who left back to their original homes. And I would not be surprised, as the New York Times said, that around 4 million Israelis would leave Israel in case they know what's really happening among the decision makers and the talks that are exchanging, because it is a total failure of the Israeli doctrine to protect the Israelis in Israel. That is the biggest hit that the Iranian missiles and drones added to the lack of security of the Israeli settlers.
And furthermore, Elijah, what's important, it showed yesterday, I mean, if we look at the numbers that were sent from Iran, had it not been for the American defense, the Brits and the French who supported Israel, literally Israel would not have been able to absorb this on its own yesterday. It would not have been able to defend itself, and you would have seen a lot more land in Israel. So it also proved that Israel, honestly, and it took 3 major countries to actually provide the necessary defense that they did in order to help Israel get out of the muddle that it was in yesterday. and that is another big blow for Israel and the Israelis. And I think Iran was literally on its own yesterday. It went against all the odds, knowing that were sided against it, except for the spaces of Iraq and Syria. And it couldn't do without the space of Jordan, but Jordan let it down. But despite that, Iran went ahead on its own, and literally it was taking on the British, the French, the Americans, and the Israelis. So yeah, I think, and like Elijah said, it's a huge blow to the morale and the psychology of the Israelis to feel secured, in the future.
I wish that people hadn't seen all of these videos of Palestinians and their resilience and being bombed, because that's not normal for people to act that way. And, you see these Israelis scurrying. And, I think that people see the Palestinians and, Palestinians are like, oh, I just got bombed. It's no big deal. And that's like a terrible way for people to see it, because then you see the Israelis and people don't understand how psychologically damaging this really is. And they're kind of running and you're like, the fear that Iran has just instilled in the Israelis is a win in and of itself, which is so the victories aren't the damage. The victories were more psychological and kind of cultural and sociological. So where does that leave Israel now and how to retaliate?
Sarah, the funny thing is, just before this, the attacks happened yesterday, I was like, screening all the Israeli alerts and seeing what's happening and tweeting them and what have you. And then I came to one, I was about to tweet it, and then the whole thing kicked off. And they had put out, they would say, with the numbers, with the WhatsApp numbers, they had said to the Israelis, lines to call in during this, because they were expecting it to happen. So they were telling the Israeli people that, if you get stressed and, your psychology is a little bit impaired, during, if something happens tonight and you need to talk to somebody, right? This is the number to call. And so what you're saying, and yet the Palestinians have had no numbers to call. They've had to get up every day, kick the dust off them and march on with no psychological aid. Yesterday, apparently, there were no casualties, but apparently the lines were jammed with callers who were psychologically disturbed from what happened. And that shows you the difference in the stamina and the character of people.
Well, I don't know if Westerners really understand the degree to which Israelis are told to fear and hate Arabs, and Zionists are told to fear and hate Arabs. So their whole life, they're like, even if you see an Arab, you better run. So then the bombs start coming, and it's like Iran can just capitalize on these decades of brainwashing where these people are like, I've been told that hellfire is going to rain down from Iran. And then Iran's like, here's the hellfire. And so the people are like, well, oh my God. So how does Israel retaliate? They like capability wise, Elijah, how do they stack up to Iran? But really, how do they retaliate? Is there, I don't see how, but is there any way for Israel to turn around and make this into a draw, not even a win? Or how does Israel sort of save face? They're kind of trying to play that you guys didn't really hit anything, didn't do any damage, blah, blah, blah. That's a cope. We know that's just a cop out. But how do they actually retaliate? We know that they will. What do you think happens next?
I don't think Israel is going to retaliate exactly in the same way that Iran has retaliated, for many reasons. First, they don't have ammunition to start a new war with Iran, and they need 10 times more ammunition what they have already spent on Gaza. And the Americans, the Germans, and the Europeans cannot supply the demand, because the Israelis used a lot of ammunition, because they are destructive, they are addictive, they don't look at strategic objectives. Secondly, that will have a very negative effect on Joe Biden's election, because although he may acknowledge to start a war, which I don't think he will, but we're just saying in a worst case scenario, then he cannot stop it when he wants. So starting a war is easy, stopping it is something completely different and is out of Joe Biden's control. This is another reason why Israel is not going to retaliate in the same way. The third point is Iran is not going to be on its own this time. So the Wali Faqih Sayyid Ali Khamenei rejected the offer of the allies to participate in biggest role in the first attack, because he said this is an attack that belongs to Iran and Iran only. But in the second attack and the second retaliation, every single front is going to be on fire, and Israel will be bombed by the Lebanese front, on the Syrian front, from Iraq, from Yemen, and from Iran. And another point is the Iraqis, the first thing they will do is to bomb the hell out every single US base in Iraq, in Erbil, in Ain al-Assad, in al-Taji, everywhere in Iraq. And they will make sure they can inflict serious damage on the Americans. Again, I don't think Joe Biden wants that, because he's going to run the elections very soon to start his presidential campaign. He's already losing the Arab voters, the Arab Americans, and he can't afford to look weak, because he cannot even willingly to show strength to make a change. And another point is, what would be the Israeli objective? Just to retaliate, to impose deterrence is not going to happen, because then the missiles and the drones are going to start raining, and this time without any warning, and this time from a very short distance, and everything is going to be different. And this is why the Israelis are not going to retaliate. And my last point here, and I stop, is how Netanyahu is going to justify further destruction to the economy, to the infrastructure of the country, to the oil and gas platform, the closure of all the harbors, of all the airports, if he starts a wider war. He showed his limitation in a tiny little place called the Gaza Strip, and he's not capable of occupying it in 190 days, 364 square kilometers. He wants to stand up to Hezbollah, to the Iraqi resistance, to the Yemeni resistance, to the Syrian resistance on the Golan Heights, the occupied Golan Heights, and to Iran. I don't think so.
The cost as well, Sarah. Yesterday, the calculations yesterday by the end of the night was that on the Israeli side, obviously with the support of its allies, the cost came up to 1.1 billion. Yesterday was spent in this defense. And if you look at the Iranian side, maybe I'm wrong on this, even if it's higher, but it's nowhere near what we're talking about on the Israeli side. I read today about 35 million. I want to double it and say, 100 million, or 50 million or whatever. It's still a lot less than 1.1 billion that was spent yesterday to defend Israel from this Iranian attack. So if they want to go and launch another big one, 1.1 billion, we say Israel, it's costing Israel. Actually, it's not costing Israel. It's costing the taxpayer like you in the US and some of us in the UK, because UK was involved, and the French and the European, and all the economies in Europe are not doing so well. So do they want to go into another big one? But I don't know whether they will start doing what they usually do, Elijah, somebody senior and doing selective assassinations, which they're usually good at. That's the way they may retaliate if they do. I don't know.
But today the head of the RRGC, Brigadier General Salami, and the chief of staff of the Iranian army warned Israel that they would retaliate on any attempt of assassination or any hit of any Iranian official anywhere. So that was a clear warning. And I think one of the warnings that Iran sent, obviously, was the ship that is partially owned by an Israeli businessman in the Strait of Hormuz before the attack, to indicate this is what we can do if you start the assassination or the sabotage attacks, etc. So there are so many other theaters that Iran can respond. But for the first time, there was a clear warning from Iran to Israel after the bombing.
Okay, so
it was like, you know, it was like watching the mothership take off yesterday, right? It was the, you know, I've always referred to Iran because it's been like the, so it was like the mothership of the Axis, you know. So the chick stayed home and, you know, watched, and the mothership took on the big job yesterday. But they've said if they do, they will actually retire. You know, Iran will respond in a much fiercer way than it did.
And you know, the thing about these sort of one-off
Sarah,
attacks.
back to you.
Oh yeah, the thing about these sort of one-off terrorist guerrilla attacks, these sort of embassy attacks, Ukraine does the same thing to kind of pull Russia out. And I always tell people that they're horrible, yes, but they're actually really good signs of a failing and very desperate enemy. So do you see any strikes on Iran proper, or do you guys see more of what you were just discussing, those sort of isolated assassination attempts, hits on like embassies, and sort of anything like that? Because it's looking kind of how the capabilities stack up between each other, like the numbers wise. And it looks like Iran could do a ground invasion and be done with Israel in like the snap of a finger. But Israel also has a very strong air force and just had a new shipment of aircraft. So do we think that there's any chance of an escalation into a more hot war, or do we think that it'll still be kind of these tit for tat sort of guerrilla assassinations sort of things?
I don't think it's for lack of not wanting, because if we remember Netanyahu, he's been itching to start a war with Iran, going back even before September. Particular period, you know, every year he comes up with a reason, or he tries to tell somebody, you know, Iran is doing this, Iran is doing that. But I think yesterday would have sent a message that Iran is capable, Iran is strong, Iran is not afraid, and Iran can do what Iran needs to do. Again, it's not for lack of wanting, but I think the rest of the world him in on this one. I don't think they would want to see a massive retaliation from Israel against Iran that is going to drag the region into something, because this time also bases of Americans in the region will be targeted by Iran. It's not just going to be a retaliation against Israel if Israel did a big number on the Iranians. The Americans in the region, their base, everything becomes basically, you know, up for the game, up for grabs or attacks. So I don't know that they're going to do a massive one like Elijah was saying. He doubts it. I mean, but then again, I don't put anything past them, right? Everything has shown us that the Israelis are always, you know, they'll say something and then they'll do the total opposite. I don't know. I don't think they will just now.
Well, as long as the Islamic Republic exists, there will always be attempt to sabotage the situation in Iran. And we have seen how the intelligence services have used the Kurds in the north, and then they use also the Sistan Baluchistan area in the south, southwest, and in the northeast. Northwest and southeast. And these attempts to create troubles in Iran will always happen and take place. And there are also other attempts like the Mahsa Amini, or like the riots where the rioters destroy banks, ambulances, kill policemen, to make it sound like it is an internal uprising, where the Americans will not give up and the Israelis will not give up on trying to create unrest in the country. But guess what? With this hit, every time there is a hit against Iran, the perpetrators get a counter effect. So if we remember when Donald Trump and Mike Pompeo killed the Brigadier General Qasem Soleimani, there were millions in the street in support of Iran, because this is the pride of Iran. You cannot go and kill their generals. And what they have done, the Americans have done, is to bring the Iranians more together. And by going and killing their officers in Damascus on so many occasions, but going to destroy the consulate and allowing the drones and the missiles to fly over the Iranian territory and allow the Iranian to see how the attack has begun. But that is another boost for another at least 5 years ahead, where people will stand behind the Islamic Revolution. So every time they try to do something, it turns against them. And is always the Americans and the Israelis offering the best opportunity to inject the new blood in the Islamic Revolution in Iran, and every time with the bad intention to create the opposite effect. So I think we can count on the Americans and the Israelis to continue attempting to create havoc, to bring the Iranians even more together every time that they forget that they need to be all united.
I think this question's probably more for
Yeah,
Hala.
you're right, because the Iranians.
Oh, well, I think this question is more for Hala,
because the Iranians have a very good. Yeah.
Go ahead, Hala. Go ahead.
Sorry. Go. I'm waiting. Okay, I was just going to say the Iranian strong sense of nationalism, and I think every time you attack something that that is very important to Iran, you actually stir the sense of nationalism in them, which is what Elijah is saying, and you bring them closer to the regime. And if they're trying to, I say regime, as in just the terminology, if you're trying to split them, to make them go against it, you're not helping it, because they are very nationalistic people. And when you touch something that is Iranian, you've touched them in a bad way, and they will just, they all sort of embrace it. They come together, they come to the government, and they just go there. And they've stirred the mothership, and they've stirred the big bear. And I wouldn't, that big bear is now, the genie is literally out of the bottle. And if anything else they want to do, it's ready for that.
So I guess this question is more for Hala. What I've been seeing, I'm obviously not Muslim, but what I've been seeing is this sort of divide. We had a really great community that kind of just came together right behind Palestine, obviously for obvious reasons. And then once the dust settled, these sort of sectarian divides reared their ugly heads again. And we kind of thought that things might be okay. But in the recent weeks, maybe in the last month or so, this anti-Iran sentiment has really bubbled up. And now we heard the whole Iran will never do anything. Iran, blah, blah, blah. Iran is actually allied with Israel. That's my favorite one. Iran is actually allied with Israel. They're not doing it in Gaza. They're going to take over Palestine, blah, blah, blah. So then Iran strikes back. And now these people... Is there any way to get these people to be grateful that Iran just did it, or to get them to coalesce again behind this cause? Iran is the best option that we have. We supported Ansarullah. We support Hezbollah. I don't understand why there's such a huge leap to go and support the people that are supporting the people that we support. It's very strange to me, and I'm wondering how we get people to kind of come together and stop disparaging Iran, because all of that does is create more of a victory for Israel, or carry more water for the Zionists. And because Iran's who we have, that's the leader of the axis of resistance.
Look, Sarah, I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and I've been observing the same thing, and I've been going through and listening and seeing what's happening, and it is quite deflating, if you want, to see that, how it all started and how it's ending. I do blame certain characters that have sort of stirred that, because, they've gone sectarian, they've used sectarian language at a time when really, this is really no time for it, all of us have our issues and our problems with with this side or that side, but when we were all united under one umbrella, which is at the moment to concentrate to support the Palestinians and Gaza, to bring people back together. You see that the thing is, it's big talk. Iran talks and talks and talks and doesn't deliver. Iran, blah, blah, that does not, Iran is not supporting the Palestinians. Iran is doing nothing for the Palestinians, etc., etc., etc. Now Iran has done something, even though Iran was responding to its own thing. So let's say, okay, Iran is being selfish. It's nothing to do with the Palestinians. But they forget that the 7 killed, they're killed as a result of the Palestinians because of Iran on its own, that every time somebody's being killed, one of the generals is one of these people that has been helping support resistance, like Palestinians, like Lebanon, and they're being killed. The point is, up to yesterday, everybody's complaining that Iran does nothing or Iran does very little, and Iran is full of talk, and that's it. All talk, but talks the talk, but doesn't walk the walk. Well, Iran, you'd be surprised, Sarah. Everyone is saying this is all theatrics. It was pre-planned. I mean, imagine theatrics that cost 1.1 billion, right? Dragged in the French and the British and the Americans and the Israelis, but that this is theatrics. And that it was just a show to save Iran, but also to hurt Israel. So whichever way Iran goes, whatever it does, there are people that will not be happy. I think there are old roots to these reasons, that go back. It's to do with religion and sects and sectarianism. And I think people, in the Arab world, in some of the Arab world, as much as they're pro-Palestinian, but they're angry governments are not doing anything, and then they're venting against Iran, which is actually doing everything. I mean, people that said Iran was not at war, I keep on telling them, but Iran has been at war since the beginning, because this axis functions as a result of Iran. This axis breathes. Every bullet, everything they have, every technology, even if Iran didn't give them the bullet, it gave them the technology, for example, to make Iran not be at war. It is at war. But no, they want to see it, in the front line, waging war like in the old days. Well, Iran did yesterday, and now they're criticizing it. It didn't do well. It was theatrics. So whichever way you go, there's no wins. But I don't think Iran cares. And I don't think the axis, if they're going to listen to what people said, they wouldn't be where they are today. They just have to do what they have to do. Those people will remain. It's for us to pick them out and not allow them into our areas, into our spaces, into our conversations, into our communities, because they cause problems. I agree. Eli, if you have some more to add to this, without spelling it out too much.
No, you covered quite well, I must say. But I think whoever hates Iran will continue hating Iran, whatever Iran does.
Exactly.
And who likes Iran and supports Iran for what Iran stands for in support against the oppressor. There is no government that is perfect anywhere in the world. And there are always people who are against the government and people who are with the government. So far, we have seen Iran under very harsh sanctions since 1979, 1980, since President Jimmy Carter, and all the maximum pressure and the harshest sanctions ever on Iran. Well, Iran managed without the West, and the only thing that is asking of the West to leave it alone and not to impose sanctions on it, not to starve the population. How can you stand with America when Mike Pompeo, as a foreign secretary, told the Iranians, if you want to eat, you have to come to us? You cannot say something more humiliating to the Iranian to ask him or her if they want to eat to come to America. Well, they would prefer to fight and stand with any kind of ruling that they have voted for with democracy, and they will not stand with the United States. America went to kill Qasem Soleimani, for example. America killed their loved general for many people. And then the Americans said, well, he killed many Americans. That is wrong. He didn't kill Americans. On the contrary, he collaborated with the Americans when Iran worked with the Americans against the Taliban at the beginning, when the Taliban were killing American diplomats and others at the first beginning of the Taliban. And then he could work as an Iranian official with the Iraqis before the attack and before the war on Iraq. And then he works against ISIS, and ISIS was a danger for everybody. And the Americans said he had the intention to kill Americans, but there were no proof. So what they are doing all the time is trying to submit Iran, because Iran refused to submit to the United States. And Iran always said, we want good relationship with the West. We want to continue doing business with the West, like any other country, but we don't want the West to govern us. That is Iranian problem today. And because of that, and what Hala said rightly, not only the sectarian, but because just some people don't like you because you exist, no matter what the reason is behind it. So these people will continue standing against Iran, and it's okay. It's okay to have people who don't like you, and okay if you have people who like you.
I love that Iran. I mean, they've always been kind of isolationist, but I love that Iran is like the new Russia. You guys get to be the pariah state. You guys get to be the one everybody hates for a while, no matter how many bombs
The
you drop.
the new monster.
Yes, you're the new Hitler.
Monster.
Congratulations, you guys win. Like that's like.
But you know, but Sarah, I mean, you say that, and you say that jokingly. Every time, you know, whatever happens, the West always needs to create an evil, a monster, a devil, right? And to be able to justify everything wrong that they do, from the arms to you know, businesses and economy to a whole lot of things. And if there isn't one, they will create one. They always need the monster. That's I've always to, you know, to wage wars, you know, because this is going to do that, because he's going, because we're always. So if it's not Iran, it can be somebody else, you know. Well, now it's Russia as well. Russia and Iran.
I know. Russia actually kind of enjoys it, I think. I think Russia likes being like kind of the bad guy. And we're kind of running out of time, so I sort of want to end on a hopeful note. I talked to Professor Morandi, who, gosh, what an inspirational man he is. If you guys didn't see that, viewers, please watch the interview with Professor Morandi about Iran. But he's very optimistic and a realist, but he's optimistic and thinks that this is the end. This is the end of the Zionist entity as we, in the iteration that we know it, at least. Do you two also agree as well?
Yeah, I think it's the beginning of the end. You know, that might take still some time, but I think everything we've known and seen and understood and believed about the Zionist entity in the past, I think it's now changed. The last 6 months and last night, you know, the last 6 months has changed it. And, you know, this, again, you know, the superpower that we thought undefeatable, unbreakable, actually showed many weakenesses, and showed that it is just as bad and as weak as anyone else. And it is actually a fractioning from within. And now you just, you know, you just sort of provide the flints and let it blow on its own. This Zionist state cannot. I used to be told this when I was very, very young by my father and uncles, who were all, you know, nationalists and, you know, all for the Palestinian cause. And I used to look at them saying, what the hell are you guys talking about? Israel will not exist. You know, you mark my word, my girl. Well, actually, I misunderstood what they were saying. Yeah, it won't exist as we know it now, the Zionist state, but it will always exist as, you know, as a state. But yeah, I think it's beginning to break up. But that might take years before it happens. But the beginning has started, and that's what we're witnessing at the moment. Eli, what do you think?
See with us.
I think
I'm taking over your job, Sarah.
Yes, it's okay. I love it. I'm just watching.
I think what's happening today is very unusual for Israel. And by watching people leaving Palestine, leaving the land that they thought they can come and occupy and kill its people or kick them out of their home, and for the Israeli army and government to offer them security, is gone. the people in Israel can no longer feel safe. And if they want to continue killing Palestinians just to impose their will over the Palestinians and steal their land, destroy their property, this is something that is called an invitation for another war against Israel, another 7th of October. And I think many Israelis today have lost faith in their government and in their army. And today, after the Iranian attack, even more, after Hezbollah's war that started on the 8th of October, mini war, and again, they don't want to return there. So if there is no longer any place that is safe in Israel, an occupied land where the Israelis refuse to live with the Palestinians, the owners of the land, where they think only by killing them, torturing them, raping their women, and humiliating them, behaving as an apartheid regime, they can break the will of the Palestinians. They are wrong because they've been trying it for the last 75 years and they have failed. And this is why I think Israel can fall only from within. And it is happening.
Well, it is happening. The beginning of the end, and Palestine will be free. The rise of multipolarity is upon us. Everybody is saying the same thing. This is just the next step. And each step is painful. Each step is work. But each step, we get to the next increment of getting to a better world. And to the people who don't like Iran, don't worry. In multipolarity, you guys get your own poll. You can be in the do not like Iran poll, and Iran will be over in the Middle Eastern poll. And you guys can, you guys can stay in the other poll. That's what multipolarity is. Well, Hala and Elijah, thank you so much for doing this on this weekend with all of this news. I'm sure we'll be talking again really soon. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and what you're up to?
Ladies first.
So, I'm usually on circulate. Thank you, Elijah. Such a gentleman. On Twitter. So my handle is at Hala Jaber, and I now I'm kind of retiring from that, but just pontificating on Twitter every now and then. That's where you find me.
And I think you also find me on Twitter, AJM and I have a blog where I write my articles, and you can subscribe if you want to, if you like the articles.
It's a very good blog.
And I have my own blog, yes. So thank you for having me, Sarah.
Subscribe. It's a very good blog. You get
subscribe to the blog. Subscribe to the blog. Subscribe to the Twitter. Go to the Twitter Spaces. We're having an after space today after the show to discuss the stream and the strikes on Israel. If you guys would like to join us, and our listeners, if you would like to join us too, please visit ddgeopolitics.com. We have the original Shahed t-shirts that are from the Russian invasion. We've been doing this for 2 years with the Iranian drone warfare. But thank you guys all again. Please enjoy the rest of your weekend. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Will be free. Thank you.